Okay, this chrome trim plate can go on now because we've got the film advance stuff in place, and it's held in place with 2 screws through the strap lug at the rewind end. So I'll just get those fitted. And I'm holding the strap lug towards the end of the camera between finger and thumb while I do those screws up, because the holes are slightly slotted and it needs to be out this way. That's good. Where is the cocking rack? Here's our cocking rack. Let me drop that in place temporarily and see how it appears. I would expect it to sit there, I think. That looks good. Got 2 teeth engaged with the rack at that point. A little bit of clearance at this end, just enough. I'll lubricate that and we'll put it in place. Now, taking synthetic grease here, I'll just run some on that rack, on the underside there, both sides of the other end. Drop that back in place, 2 teeth engaged, make sure it's engaged with the shaft at the back here. Get back in place, there you go. This bracket holds it down over here, and it's got a screw through it in this position. And it has this post through it in the other position. So I'll just put that post on there. Check that that bracket's on square. That looks okay. Why is that not in place? That's better. And the strap lug at this end, which holds the rack in position too. It's got a slot underneath it which actually guides that rack. And we'll put that screw in there. That's coming out later because that holds the meter down in place. So let's just remove our rubber band for a second. I'm holding down the lock lever slightly so it clears the film advance. That appears good. That seems to work smoothly enough. At that stage I'm going to put the chrome trim on the base of the camera, which closes off that part. We can do that now because we can remove the film advance lever. The shutter cocking rack is stopping the film advance from unscrewing, unwinding its return spring. So we can remove this. And a chrome trim plate should be here. Now the chrome trim does a number of things for us here. One, it stops us from pressing either of these levers down too far. And it's got a stop on it here which stops that film advance from rotating too far as well. Not that that typically is a problem. So I'll get 3 screws in at this end. And 1 at the other end just to hold it so it's not flapping. Alright, 3 screws there, I'll do them up tight. These are all nickel plated screws. There are two screws that are identical to this in design that hold the top cover on. They're chrome plated, not nickel plated. Don't mix them up because nickel plating does not match chrome. That film advance lever can go back on there now. Check the action. That lock lever seems to catch on something. So it's alright, it's held down all the way. Yeah, I think that's okay. Alright. Rubber band off there, I don't want that shaft getting away though. That feels good. Alright, what's next in this box of tricks? I'll fit these remaining screws around this chrome trim at the base of the camera, I think. While I'm here, and that job's done. The front door. We need a front door. The camera's no good without a front door. Now I did put a little drop of solvent on this button and I expected it to free up, and it did free up, but it's not as free as I'd like it to be. So I'm going to investigate this and clean it a bit further. So I'm going to unscrew that screw. Remove that, take out the pin and its return spring, and they are very, very sticky. So I'm going to have to clean that rubbish out. That grease has really gone nasty. So taking a toothpick, I've just put a drop of naphtha on that and I'm just working that in that hole, see if I can clear that rubbish out. Doesn't look too bad actually. And the other components I'll clean with a cotton bud and some naphtha. That grease is just sticky. It's gone like treacle. That spring is full of it. See if I can blast that away with a squirt of this CRC Lectra Clean. It's just very solid, that grease. It's just like almost like a blob of wax. That's better. And the button I'll clean. Some synthetic grease. So I'll just run some into there. Fit my spring and button back into there. Well, that feels much better. Run the screw in, get that started. Just tighten that up. That's much happier, that's as it should have been. So to fit the front door, need to run a bit of synthetic grease into that slot there and at the base of the camera. Slide the door on and swing it into the body cavity at the hinge point. Two washers and two screws. So, one washer at the top of the door. These are often varied. Some cameras will have one washer, some will have two, some may have three. Very rarely they may have none at all, but usually if they have none at all, it's because someone lost them when they were servicing the camera. Didn't know what they were, didn't know where they came from. It's the one at the top. It's sometimes difficult to get in. I have to pull that into line with the tip of the tweezers. That screw up tight. Check that it opens and closes. No undue rattles. That's good. That's the front of our camera done. Now before I put the shutter and so forth in there, I'd like to do that leatherette on the base of the camera, I think, which I can do now that we have our door in place. Because prior to that, of course, we wouldn't have been able to get to the hinge pins. So, I'll just give this a wipe with some naphtha because I've had my greasy fingers all over this while I've been working on the film advance. That's good. Not an awful lot came off there, that's fine. And our leatherette, here it is. I'll give that a wipe. I'm reluctant to scrape at that because I know the leatherette is a bit keen to disintegrate, so I'm just going to wipe that to remove any loose rubbish. Normally I would scrape that with the scalpel to remove any lumps and bumps. I'm not keen to do that. Okay, that'll do. And now I'll apply some adhesive and glue that in place. I'll apply some adhesive. And spread that out with a toothpick. I'll shift that across. I don't really want to get adhesive on the other side of this leatherette because I feel it won't like it. That's a good start. Now I'll make it a bit more on here and transfer it into the places that I'm light. That looks okay, and I'll make sure I've got plenty around that hole there because I need that to mate up with the leatherette on the base of the camera. Let's get this in position. Okay, making sure that's down firmly. You can see we've got a patch there that was crumbling when I took it apart. A piece of it's disappeared there. We'll have to fill that with black wax. And there was a break. There was a piece loose here, wasn't there? And it was left stuck on the body. Well, that's actually disappeared. You can't tell that there's that there was ever a problem there. So I'd say that that's a good result given the state of that leatherette when we started. Yeah, I'm quite pleased with the look of that. That's very good. There's a crease line across here. That's where the break between the aluminium body and the metal plate underneath here. One's obviously higher than the other. The recess may have been machined too deep, or not deep enough, so that the plate sits slightly proud. That's okay though, that's a good result. I can put my film advance lever back in place now. And it can have the full complement of 3 screws. The leatherette patch. Put a leatherette patch to go on here. Where is it? Oh, there it's hiding. Okay. And from memory, that was a bugger to get off. Let's see how we get on. Putting it back. I'll apply some adhesive to this on the end of a toothpick. Smaller pieces of leatherette, you never want to be just squirting it straight out of the tube. It's too hard to control. Larger pieces, it's less of a problem. You can be squirting it into the middle of the piece of leatherette and then using your toothpick to move it to the edges as required. That looks okay. Let's fit that in position. This leatherette on the base. Leatherettes always shrink back, so they're often reluctant to fit down neatly around a raised boss like this that I want to lift off. That's okay. That leatherette patch looks good on the film advance. The back catch, release and cover can go on there now, I suppose, while I'm at this stage. That spring looks slightly mutilated to me. Which means somebody might have had a fight with that at some stage. They can be awkward to get into position, and if you muck it up, then you can end up damaging the spring if you manage to get it trapped underneath the lever. So I'll just clean these components. They're pretty clean anyway. I'm just giving them a wipe to make sure there's nothing in there that we could have got rid of. Getting the spring in place is always entertaining. What you have to do is start with one of the screws through the cover. Come on camera, focus up. Just thinking about it. Fit the lever in place. Then fit the spring into position. So it goes between the screw and onto that tiny tab on the lever. Then you need to apply it to the camera without disturbing anything, like that. Get that screw run down lightly. Check that it works, and it does. Put the other screw in place. Check that it still works, and then tighten the two screws. That's it. That's a good result. So for a leatherette on the base of the camera, I've got to patch that little dot that you can see there. It's about 1.5 mm by 1 mm. And we'll fix that with a bit of wax. But otherwise our leatherettes are good. Film advance is good. Let's put the shutter in the body next. I'll take my shutter assembly, remove the retaining ring, drop this in place in the body. Check what happens when I go to advance it. Does it cock? It didn't cock the shutter, so I know that I'm at least one tooth out, and probably more than one tooth out on this curved rack. So I'll lift the shutter up, move my rack across a notch, see how we get on. No, that didn't cock it. One more tooth, just advance that rack, one tooth. Something is, that's the film advance popping, that's making that popping noise. The shutter is not cocking. Something is not happening here. I've got to figure out what. Let me watch the action. Well, I know that shutter cocking rack didn't slip on there. I don't know that it didn't slip somewhere else. Let me investigate. It certainly sounded to me like it was getting to the end, running off the end of the tooth somewhere. It all appears to work normally. There's something stopping this from moving completely. I have to investigate. Did that cock round too far? I wonder whether that lever in there's bent. Let's have another little look. I think that shutter sticking down is my problem here. I think I've got that too much tension on that rubber band. It's not helping me. Let's try this. I can still hear something coming up with it. It sounds like the rack's coming off that transfer shaft at that end. That's the lock lever making that noise. We'll be back shortly. No, the mystery was revealed. Something was just simply not done up tight. That bracket was not held down firmly at that point. The screw, I'd done the screw up tight, but it must have stopped. It was jammed up against something and it didn't run down the full way. So now we have a shutter that works. So that's good. All I need to do is put the retainer ring in place. So I'll just hold the shutter firmly in place with my hand, flip the camera over, drop the retainer ring in from the back, and take the tool engage it with the retaining ring, snug it up, that's good. I'm pleased with that. Well, next I think rangefinder. To put the rangefinder in place, there's a couple of jobs I need to do. First is I put a touch of lubricant on this cam here. This is the lobe that picks up the coupling screw from the focus mechanism. And second, I want to put a couple of spots of lacquer under the base of this so that when it's screwed down, it stays where it was left. It doesn't shift on the body. It's not uncommon for when cameras get dropped that their rangefinder goes out of adjustment, and it's because the rangefinder is shifted on the body. There are two big screws that hold it, but there are no dowels. It's not firmly located by dowels. Let's get the screw in here and started. Is it the right way up? Yes. And the second screw, this is just a case of you have to drop them in from above basically, line them up, release them. In an ideal world they fall straight down into the hole below like that, and you just need to tighten them up. Now I can check the alignment by looking out the window, and I'll let you know what I see. My moving image is just very, very slightly low, so if I tighten up that screw, that may do it. Yeah, that's good. And it's going beyond infinity, which is exactly where it was before. So I'll tighten up this lock screw at the front here, this little adjustment screw. That'll stop the arm from going back that far. And then I'll make an adjustment to the position of the rest of it. And that screw is not rotating. That's good. So I need to adjust the horizontal position because it goes back beyond the infinity position. That's my lock screw. That's my adjustment screw there. Let's just see how we get on. Now it doesn't quite go back far enough. The adjustments required are very slight, so don't be at all surprised if there's an awful lot of toing and throwing before you get it right. That is to be expected. That would be too far. No, it wasn't. The images should just meet at an infinity target just as the focus scale ring reaches the infinity position. It shouldn't meet early, but it should meet. That's good. Right, well I'll go and check my close focus distance. Focus is all good. That's looking good. So I'm just checking the adjustment of my shutter release now to make sure that the shutter fires at the instant the film advance releases to allow you to wind on to the next shot. That seemed pretty good to me. No, that seems great. The meter, the exposure meter can go back on the top. Now I put a spot of lacquer on here to lock that screw at the top there. I also put a spot of red lacquer on here to lock that position that I'd locked with the clear lacquer, or to make it obvious that I'd locked it at that point. Apply a little bit of synthetic grease in here. That's all that's required. I'd already lubricated the rack, of course. Now our film release button needs to go on. Typically I'll just run some molybdenum paste through the centre there. This has a large return spring, goes on the post there, and it catches underneath the meter, so it needs to go on before the meter is put in place. Sometimes it's a bit awkward getting that seated. It is a bit of an awkward arrangement. You can tell it's an awkward arrangement because of the shape of that component. It's got too many bends and folds in it for a well designed machine. That shutter release is just lifted out of its slot down here, I can tell. That's better. Get this screw in that holds the front of the meter in position. Right, and I'm just about ready to put the top cover in position. The most obvious variable at this stage is what the frame counter is going to do, because the shutter cocking rack can go in basically two positions and work well. If it's in one position and you put it back in the other, the frame counter may advance too far with each movement. What's happening here? Why is that sticking? Why is that sticking there? Okay. Right, I'll check this frame counter. Well, the frame counter is fine. I've checked that. That's ideal. That's just as it should be. I've managed to put the screws in the top cover while I've been at it. Nothing exciting there. On the base plate, you see I filled that little pit with some black wax, and there was the crack there where that lump had stayed stuck on the base plate. You'd have to know where to look to pick that there was a problem there. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good, and it's a lot better than trying to make do with some replacement leatherette which doesn't match at all. Anyway, our last task here is to do the rewind knob, and I've got that in pieces, and it doesn't really require an awful lot of work. So these parts are all cleaned and ready for reassembly. Basically, I just need to make sure that the wavy washer is free from corrosion. Put a tiny smear of grease on there. Put it on that central piece. Put the base over the top. And run the screw in. Now I've got a tool to do that. You could get away with using a pair of stiff tweezers. Just be careful not to slip, because it will make a mess. So I've done that up tight. So our film reminder dial here will move. Probably not that you'll be using some of these films. I know for a fact that Kodachrome is a bit hard to find these days. So fitting that to the camera, pop the film advance up, the rewind up rather. This sleeve goes over the top of that. Put the knob on the top, check that it lifts all the way. Something through the fork to stop it turning, just tighten that with your fingers. Now, apart from a wipe over, the camera's ready to go home. Thanks for watching.